Welcome back to this very special edition of NCBA's Cattleman to Cattleman, live from the 2013 Cattle Industry Annual Convention and NCBA Trade Show here in Tampa, Florida. Australia, Canada, the United States, New Zealand, and Mexico. Believe it or not, almost half of the world's beef and cattle exports are from those 5 nations. NCBA makes it a priority to continuously work on opening international trade markets, and that's one of the main goals of the 5-Nation Beef Alliance. And joining me in the studio is Andre Piedra, Chief Economist for the National Confederation of Livestock Organizations in Mexico. Saul Mercado, he's the Secretary for the 5-Nations Beef Alliance and a consultant with NCBA. John Maswell. John is the Director of Government and International Relations for the Canadian Cattlemen's Association, and of course our very own Forrest Roberts, the CEO of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight.
Thank you for having us, Kevin.
Well, John, let's start with you. Tell folks, what is the 5-Nations Beef Alliance?
Well, you know, it's a grouping of national cattle producer organizations. It's been around now for, I guess, going on 4 decades. We had our kind of started back in 1976 with the very first International Beef Producers Conference. And since that time, you know, they really found that there was a need for that. They kind of formalized the regular meetings by about 1983 as the 4 Nations Beef Conference: Canada, the US, Australia, and New Zealand. Mexico joined then in '93 to be the 5th member. And then just a few years back in 2006, with everything that's going on internationally, we decided to sort of rebrand it into a formal alliance, and it became the 5-Nations Beef Alliance. So that's where we stand now.
And Forrest, tell us who all is involved currently in the alliance, and do you have any plans for expansion?
Sure, Kevin. Well, as the name implies, the 5 nations, as you introduced, starting with NCBA, representing the U.S. cattle industry, followed by our partners and neighbors to the north with the Canadian Cattlemen's Association, and our partners and our neighbors to the south with CNOG, which represents the Mexican cattle producers, and then also Beef and Lamb New Zealand, which represents the New Zealand industry, and then certainly last but not least is the Cattle Council of Australia, who represents the Australian beef industry. So the 5 nations have been, as John outlined, the core of what we've been able to focus on here over the past several decades. But as we look toward expansion, we have Argentina with CARBOP, who is now working with us in an observer status, and we have absolutely an opportunity of a lifetime to expand the 5-Nations Beef Alliance to what we hope will be a 10-nation beef alliance here over the next several years, and mainly targeted to a lot of the South American beef-producing countries.
Very good. Andre, we thank you for joining us all the way from Mexico, and I know, Saul, you're going to help us translate a little bit here today.
Yes,
so I would ask you, Andre, what is the mission and purpose of the 5-Nations Beef Alliance?
Como organizaciones de ganaderos, nuestro propósito fundamental es promover la producción sustentable dentro de nuestros países, a la vez superar las expectativas de los consumidores, y con ello creemos que vamos a lograr incrementar el consumo mundial de carne de bovino.
Yes, Andre is saying that the main purpose of their organization, of producer organization in their own country, is to promote the sustainable production of beef in the country, but at the same time complying with the expectations of the consumers with regards to the quality of the beef, taking care of the environment and the animal welfare issues, and ultimately to increase and to make the world market for beef grow.
Very good. And Forrest, tell us a little bit about some of your current main areas of focus within the alliance.
Well, within the 5-Nations Beef Alliance, we have really 4 major areas that we are trying to look at when we think about we're really truly operating in a global beef industry. And when we look at those issues that expound way beyond just the borders of any given country, we look first to the area of international trade. All organizations have a strong philosophy toward a balance of trade, and how do we maximize where beef fits into the diets of consumers all around the globe. So trade, international market access is our first major area of focus. Then secondly, when we look at this word called sustainability, specifically beef sustainability, we've worked very collaboratively to try to find a way to define that on a global level and then learn from each other. What are best practices that might be employed, for example, in Canada or Mexico or Australia that we can learn from in the USA and vice versa? And on that same note, when you look about issues like animal ID or animal disease traceability. There's a lot that we can learn here in the U.S. from other countries that have already implemented some of these national animal ID systems. So animal welfare and animal ID is a third major area of focus. And then last but not least is our industry, no matter whether we're in the U.S. or any of these other countries, is dependent upon the young leaders that are being developed and coming behind us. So we have a focus around young leader development to have them at the table with us when we are discussing these global beef industry issues and how we make decisions and really find common ground to align to how we make a difference in the global beef marketplace.
That's outstanding. John, why do you believe it's so important for national cattle producer organizations to become part of this alliance we've been discussing?
Well, we just think it's becoming more and more important. All of the issues that Forrest just outlined that the Alliance is working on, if you think of what is going on in all of those areas, domestically and internationally, we have animal activist groups that are trying to make it more and more difficult to raise livestock. And quite frankly, some of them have come out and said that their objective is to put us out of business. They are working internationally. They are working through some of the organizations that exist. And there's many organizations that exist that have very beneficial purposes, such as the OIE, which sets international animal health standards, the Codex for international food standards. There's the UN Food and Agriculture organizations. Some of these other groups, these activists, are using these organizations to try and advance their objectives. So we think that it's just more and more important that from the perspective of the Canadian Cattlemen's Association, if we were just to sort of go to these organizations and try and advance our positions, maybe we'll be successful, but we can be much more successful if we sit down with our U.S., our Mexican, Australian, New Zealand counterparts. We come up with common positions because you know the old saying: if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. We've heard that a lot of times, and it is so true. And we want to make sure that we're not just at the table, but we have a hand in setting the menu and how that meal gets served.
So if there's some folks watching tonight who may be leaders of some national cattle organizations, how would they get involved?
Well, as Forrest said, certainly the Alliance is open to expansion. Right now we're the 5 Nations Alliance, and we have Argentina potentially could be the 6th, and maybe we'll get up to 7, 8, 9, 10. Who knows what the number is? But the key is they really have to be a national cattle producer organization. They have to represent their national industry because they have to have the ability to have influence with their own domestic government, to help their government set positions when they go to these organizations. Also, they have to really believe in the core principles of what the 5 Nation Beef Alliance is. Whether it's certainly global trade expansion of beef. We want there to be more beef moving around the world so that we can all maximize that carcass value. They have to adhere to the same principles that we have in terms of wanting to define sustainability and have real workable rules and standards for animal welfare identification. So as long as we can find organizations like that, and there certainly are more out there that haven't joined yet, we're certainly trying to. It's part of Sowell's mission is to seek them out and invite them into the fold.
And I was going to ask you, you have an annual conference. Andre, tell us where your next annual conference is.
Las conferencias, las reuniones de las organizaciones se van turnando entre los miembros de la alianza, de manera que en este año la próxima reunión la tendremos en Australia en el mes de septiembre, en la semana que empieza el día 8. Y seguramente tendremos oportunidad de conocer un poco más de la ganadería, la genética y la tecnología que emplean los ganaderos australianos en ese país.
Yeah, and they're saying that we rotate the site every year. We have an annual conference and tour. So this year it belongs to Australia to host it. It'll be the second week in September of this year in Brisbane, Australia. We'll have the chance or the opportunity to visit the cattle industry of Australia, to learn more about their technology, their management, their concerns when we are there.
Gentlemen, thank you for being here tonight, and thanks for all you're doing for the global beef business.
Well, thank you.
For more information on the 5 Nations Beef Alliance, just log on to our website at cattlemantocattleman.org.